Traoré turned to his chief of staff, Fatima Diallo. "They'll come at us fast," he said. "Get ready for economic pressure, media spin, maybe even worse." Diallo nodded, looking concerned. "The finance minister is already seeing odd movements in our government bonds. And 3 major international news outlets have reached out, claiming they've heard about possible abuses at Mana." "How could they know anything?" Traoré asked. "We've kept that site completely secure." "They don't need facts, sir," Diallo replied. "All they need is a story." Traoré walked over to the window and looked out at Ouagadougou. "What's the latest on the investigation team?" "Dr. Konate from Forensics is putting her team together," Diallo said, "but she's asking for international help. This is beyond what we can handle with local resources." Traoré paused. Outside, help could lead to foreign interference. But Diallo was right. Burkina Faso didn't have the tools for a case this big. "Contact the International Criminal Court," he finally said. "Request a forensic team, but make sure they work under our command. Also, add Dr. Amara Oe to the team." Diallo raised an eyebrow. "The anthropologist? She's not trained for criminal investigations." "No," Traoré agreed. "But she's studied the region's mining communities for decades. If anyone can help identify the victims and understand what happened, it's her." As Diallo left to carry out the orders, Traoré turned back to the mine reports. Something about the scene kept bothering him, not just how horrific it was, but how carefully it had been arranged. It felt both ritualistic and coldly calculated, and that symbol. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number very few people even knew existed. "Maurice, I need your help, off the record." Maurice Sankara had once been the country's top intelligence officer, feared and powerful, until Traoré removed him during anti-corruption reforms. Their history was complicated, but Sankara's knowledge of West Africa's hidden networks was unmatched. "I'm retired, Mr. President," came his gruff reply. "Enjoying my garden. I need to know about a symbol, a diamond shape with a line running straight through it." There was a long pause. When Sankara finally spoke again, his voice was serious. "Where did you see that mark?" "That's not important right now." "It is very important," Sankara said, "because if you've seen that symbol, you've stepped into something very few people live to talk about." Meanwhile, a secure government building in Ouagadougou had been turned into the temporary base for the Mana investigation. Dr. Nadia Konate, Burkina Faso's top forensic expert, had already transformed it into a working lab, fast and efficient, even with limited tools. When President Ibrahim Traoré arrived, the real work was just beginning. When President Traoré entered the room for his briefing, Dr. Konate was focused on tissue samples, speaking into a recorder as her assistant took notes. Nearby, Dr. Amara Oe was going through photos from the mine site. "Mr. President," Konate acknowledged him without looking up from the microscope. "We're making progress, even with the limited resources." "Tell me what you've found," Traoré said, skipping formalities. Konate stood and pointed to a wall covered with photos and diagrams. "We've confirmed 43 victims, all men. They range in age from about 19 to 56. The causes of death vary. Some were suffocated, others beaten, and a few show signs of poisoning." "Can you identify them?" Traoré asked. "That's where Dr. Oe has been essential," Konate said, motioning toward her colleague. Dr. Oe stepped forward holding a tablet. "We've matched several of the victims to missing persons cases from mining areas. These men didn't disappear all at once. They went missing over 18 years, one by one. That's why no one noticed a pattern. In diamond mining, it's sadly common for 1 or 2 workers to go missing," she continued. "No one usually investigates. But here's what we've discovered. There's a clear pattern." She showed Traoré a map marked with dates and locations. These disappearances always followed major diamond discoveries, And they all involved workers who likely had direct contact with uncut stones. So they were killed because of what they found, or what they saw, Traoré said. That's the working theory, Oe replied, especially since the timing aligns with the uncovering of rare or unusually large diamonds. There's something else, Dr. Konate added. The way the bodies were preserved is very unusual. It involves a mix of chemicals that almost mummifies the tissue. That's not common knowledge. Not at all, she said. This method is mostly used by a few European museums to preserve ancient remains. It's highly specialized. A chill ran through Traoré. He remembered Sankara's warning. After their unsettling phone call, the former intelligence chief had agreed to meet him in person. What Sankara shared was deeply troubling. He called it Leia Noah, the Black Diamond. Sankara explained it wasn't just a criminal group. It was a secretive global network that had operated in the diamond trade for generations. Its members supposedly included mining bosses, government insiders, even European elites. All were committed to one goal: complete control over Africa's diamonds, especially the most rare and valuable ones. The symbol you described, Sankara, had told him, belongs to them. Their symbol, Sankara had said, represents the line between life and death, and anyone who crosses that line, by getting in their way, doesn't survive. You think this is just about controlling the diamond trade? Traoré had asked, still unsure. Not just controlling it, Sankara replied. They're hiding parts of it. The diamonds that are too perfect, too rare, or too important to ever be sold. They vanish before they even reach the market. Now, standing in the investigation room, staring at the photos and evidence, Traoré could no longer dismiss the possibility. What once seemed like a wild conspiracy was starting to make sense. But proving such a group existed, let alone tying it to the murders, would be incredibly difficult. Mr. President, Dr. Konate said, pulling him from his thoughts. There's one more thing you need to see. She led him to a separate room where items recovered from the mine scene were being logged and examined. On a steel table lay several small metal tags, one from each victim. These aren't ordinary tags, Konate explained. They're microchips. Each one stores data, dates, locations, and what looks like a kind of classification system. She handed him a printed report. We've managed to decode part of the data. Every victim is linked to a diamond, its size, quality, and a unique ID number. But look here, this marking shows up repeatedly. She pointed to 2 letters. Yen. We think it stands for Diamant Noir, Black Diamond. Traoré looked at the report again. These weren't random killings. They were part of something planned, documented, and carried out over nearly 20 years. The puzzle was starting to come together, but the full picture was still incomplete and growing more dangerous by the hour. Just then, his secure phone buzzed. A message from Captain Ouedraogo. Urgent situation at presidential residence. Security breach. Traoré's private home had been broken into while he was at the investigation center. Nothing had been taken, but someone had gone through his office in a very deliberate way. On his desk, they'd left one item, a small black diamond with a vertical line carved into its surface. They're sending a message, Captain Ouedraogo said, as security teams swept the home for bugs and hidden threats. They want me to know they can reach me, Traoré replied, carefully lifting the diamond with a handkerchief. But they made a mistake. They've just confirmed everything we feared. He sent the diamond to Dr. Konate for analysis and immediately ordered full security upgrades at his residence and the presidential palace. But he refused to go into hiding or change his daily routine. If I show fear now, he told his worried advisors, then we've already lost. That evening, another message arrived. The Traoré received a call from Richard Laurent, CEO of ICM. I just heard about the incident at your home, Laurent said, his voice overly polite. These are difficult times. Perhaps we should rethink our positions on the Mana situation. Are you threatening me, Mr. Laurent? Traoré asked firmly. Not at all, Laurent replied smoothly. Just expressing concern. When leaders take bold stands against powerful interests, there's always a risk of misunderstanding. Sometimes tragic ones. Like 43 murdered miners, Traoré shot back. There was a pause, then a sharp breath on the other end. Mr. President, I strongly advise against making such inflammatory remarks. They could be seen as defamatory. It's not defamation if it's the truth, Traoré said, and we're collecting more evidence every day. Evidence, Laurent said, his tone colder now, can be fragile, subject to interpretation, just like the people handling it. The threat couldn't have been clearer. Traoré hung up immediately and called Captain Ouedraogo. Double security at the investigation center. Now. But it was already too late. By the time security forces arrived, the facility was in flames. Fire crews were battling the blaze. Dr. Konaté had been rescued, but was suffering from smoke. Inhalation. 2 security officers hadn't survived. Worst of all, almost all physical evidence was destroyed. The bodies, tissue samples, and microchips were gone. But Lady Noir, the secretive group, had misjudged something. Dr. Oe had been working from her university office. She had copies of key documents and photos. And Dr. Konaté, cautious from years of handling sensitive cases, had uploaded her early findings to a secure server. Not everything was lost. If anything, the attack confirmed to Traoré that they were closing in on the truth. The next morning, however, global headlines told a different story. Lab fire destroys evidence in Burkina Faso mine case. The media blamed it on poor handling of chemicals, implying it was all an accident. The message was clear: discredit the investigation. At the same time, economic pressure mounted. Trading of Burkina Faso's government bonds was suspended on several markets due to instability. Foreign investors began pulling out, voicing concern over the country's direction. The IMF announced a routine review of Burkina Faso's loan agreements. These were modern weapons, tools of quiet warfare used to punish African leaders who dared to resist Western control. Financial pressure, media spin, diplomatic isolation. Traoré had seen it all before, but this time he was ready. He had anticipated these moves, and he had a plan. Behind the scenes, Traoré was taking bold steps. Using trusted allies, he had secured backup financing from a coalition of African and Asian banks, sidestepping the economic pressure. His communications team was working non-stop to challenge the false media narrative, presenting solid evidence of outside interference. More importantly, Traoré had reached out quietly to neighboring countries. He shared details about Diamant Noir's operations because the group's reach likely went far beyond Burkina Faso. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A junior analyst at the investigation center, assigned to review international diamond trade data, found something strange. Over the last 20 years, official output from the Mana mine had unexplained drops. These always happened after major diamond discoveries and always lined up with the disappearances of mine workers. Even more suspicious, the missing diamonds never showed up in any global supply records. It was as if they had vanished. They're running a parallel market, Traoré realized. A hidden trade in rare, high-value stones outside all official channels. This insight gave him a new strategy. If Diamant Noir was operating outside the legal diamond trade, then perhaps the legal system itself could be used against them. Traoré contacted the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme, the international body that oversees the trade in conflict-free diamonds, and presented the evidence his team had saved. He formally requested an emergency investigation into irregularities, At the Mana mine, it was a calculated risk. The Kimberley process had its flaws. It had often been accused of being too weak or too political, but it was still the industry's main defense against accusations of dealing in blood diamonds. If credible proof came to light that a major company like ICM was secretly bypassing the process, the entire diamond industry could face a scandal. The gamble paid off. Within 48 hours, the Kimberley process announced an emergency audit of all ICM operations in West Africa. Fearing another global controversy, top diamond retailers rushed to issue public statements. They distanced themselves from ICM and called for full transparency. Richard Laurent, under pressure, had no choice. He publicly welcomed the audit, while privately scrambling to contain the damage. Soon after, an international audit team landed in Burkina Faso. They were granted full access, not just to the Mana mine, but to every document linked to ICM's regional activities. As the international audit team reviewed ICM's records from the past 10 years, covering production, exports, and certification, President Ibrahim Traoré personally met with the team's leader, Dr. Thabo Beki, a well-respected gemologist from South Africa. Their discussion was honest and to the point. "Mr. President," Dr. Beki said, "I need to be clear. Our investigation is limited to verifying compliance with the Kimberley process. We're not a criminal tribunal." "I understand," Traoré replied. "But I believe once you see what's inside those records, you'll realize the legal violations and the crimes are deeply connected." "Perhaps," Beki said cautiously, "but we must remain neutral and follow our own protocols." Traoré nodded. "All I ask is that you follow the evidence wherever it leads. My government will give you full access." The audit began in full force. ICM officials stayed close by, claiming to assist, but clearly trying to keep an eye on what was being uncovered. The atmosphere grew tense as the audit team cross-checked production numbers, export logs, and certification papers. Then, on the third day, everything changed. One of the auditors uncovered a hidden set of files, buried deep inside ICM's official database protected by advanced encryption. These secret records outlined a covert operation called the Special Acquisitions Program. The files revealed that certain exceptional diamonds, classified as DN, Diamant Noir, had been deliberately removed from the official supply chain and sold privately. Each diamond in the hidden records corresponded with the microchip, tags found on the murdered miners. When the audit team confronted ICM's on-site director, he claimed ignorance, suggesting a rogue employee might be responsible. But as the auditors kept digging, they found internal communications linking the secret operation directly to ICM's top executives, including CEO Richard Laurent. The most damning document detailed containment protocols, procedures for dealing with mine workers who discovered extraordinary stones. The protocol described how to isolate, silence, and permanently remove anyone seen as a threat to the program. It was all there: the cover-up, the stolen diamonds, the murders. ICM had been running a calculated and brutal operation, systematically diverting rare diamonds from the legal market, hiding them from regulators, and eliminating witnesses. As the audit team compiled their findings, Traoré received an urgent update from Captain Ouedraogo. "Sir, Richard Laurent's private jet has requested emergency landing clearance at Ouagadougou Airport. He's coming in person." The meeting took place inside the presidential palace, an encounter that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. Laurent, once used to commanding boardrooms and dictating global deals, now sat alone, facing not just Traoré but representatives from the Kimberley process, Interpol, and the International Criminal Court. "This is highly irregular," Laurent protested, his voice shaky. The usual corporate polish was gone. "I came here to speak with the president about a business matter, not to be interrogated." "This stopped being a business matter," Traoré said calmly. The moment 43 bodies were found in your mine. Now, it's a criminal investigation. Richard Laurent sat calmly at first, reading from a prepared legal statement. ICM denies any involvement in criminal activities at the Mana facility, he said. If any wrongdoing occurred, it was the work of individuals acting without company approval. Traoré glanced at Dr. Bakey, who calmly placed a folder on the table. Mr. Laurent, Bakey said, the audit uncovered extensive evidence that contradicts your claim, including emails you personally signed, authorizing what you called special acquisitions protocols. Laurent didn't flinch, but a nervous twitch in his eye gave him away. Security protocols are standard in high-value extraction industries, he replied, trying to recover. There's nothing illegal about them. Do standard protocols usually include procedures for permanently removing witnesses? Asked the Interpol officer. That term refers to job termination and reassignment for safety reasons, Laurent claimed. Then explain this, Traoré said, sliding across a photo recovered from the investigation site, showing the hidden chamber filled with preserved, mummified bodies. Were these men relocated too? Laurent's confidence cracked. He stared at the image, struggling for words. May I speak with you privately, Mr. President? Anything you have to say, Traoré said firmly, can be said in front of these witnesses. Laurent leaned in, lowering his voice. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just ICM. It goes far beyond me. The people behind this, they don't follow rules. Political assassination is just another tool for them. If you continue with this, you're putting your life on the clock. Days, not years. Is that a threat, Mr. Laurent? No, he replied. It's a warning from someone who knows. Then his tone changed. There's still a way to fix this for everyone. We restructure the mining deal, provide generous compensation, launch development programs, help your people, help your country, help you. And the 43 murdered men? Traoré asked. Laurent's expression hardened. They're dead, Mr. President. That doesn't change. But the living can still benefit. Traoré stood. The meeting was over. Captain Ouadraogo, he said, please escort Mr. Laurent to the holding facility. He'll be detained pending charges. Conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and violations of international diamond certification laws. As security moved in, panic finally reached Laurent. You can't do this. I have diplomatic protection. My government will... They've already seen the evidence, Traoré interrupted. They've chosen not to intervene. That broke Laurent. As he was led away, he shouted back, You think arresting me changes anything? Diamant Noir doesn't end with me. They've existed for generations, and they'll outlive us all. It was the first time someone with direct knowledge had publicly confirmed the organization's existence, an admission that would prove pivotal. The aftermath came fast. Laurent's arrest sent shockwaves through the diamond world. Investigations opened around the globe. Under pressure, ICM's board turned on him, voting to fully cooperate with authorities. Internal documents poured out, exposing decades of secret deals, killings, and manipulation. The Kimberley process, rocked by scandal, rushed to implement sweeping reforms. Diamond retailers, terrified of losing public trust, rolled out new transparency, policies, and ethical sourcing pledges. For Burkina Faso, the impact was mixed. The Mana mine remained shut during the investigation, causing short-term economic hardship. But Traoré used the moment to renegotiate every mining contract in the country, securing dramatically better terms that gave Burkina Faso a real share of its own resources. Most importantly, he established the Victims' Heritage Fund, allocating 5% of all future diamond revenue to the families of those who had been killed and to rebuilding mining communities. The fund would later become a model for resource justice across Africa. As the investigation widened, similar operations were uncovered in Sierra Leone, Angola, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The reach of Diamant Noir proved even deeper than feared, an invisible empire controlling diamonds through fear, silence, and murder. 6 months later, the trial began at the International Criminal Court. 17 defendants from 3 continents faced charges ranging from conspiracy to murder to crimes against humanity. The courtroom was stunned by what it heard, a history of violence, corruption, and exploitation that mirrored colonial abuses. President Ibrahim Traoré testified for 3 days. He laid out every detail, how the cover-up had worked, how the investigation had been attacked, and how justice had finally broken through. His testimony, broadcast worldwide, transformed him from a regional leader into a global symbol of African sovereignty and resource justice. When the verdicts came in, guilty on all major counts, the judge praised Traoré's bravery, saying he had pursued the truth with dignity despite extraordinary personal and political risk. 1 year later, Ibrahim Traoré stood at the gates of what had once been the Mana mine. It was no longer a crime scene or a private empire. Now it was the People's Diamond Cooperative, a restructured, state-supervised operation where miners held ownership stakes and had a voice in how the mine was run. Beside him stood Mariam Kone, whose husband had been one of the 43 victims. She was no longer grieving in silence. Now she served on the cooperative's board. Together they opened the gates. A new chapter was beginning, not just for Burkina Faso, but for Africa. Mariam Kone now served as the cooperative's community liaison, helping ensure the mine's benefits finally reached the families and communities long exploited. Standing beside President Traoré as miners arrived for the morning shift, she spoke quietly. "My husband worked here for 16 years, she said. In all that time, he never owned anything of value. Now our son works here too, but not as just another laborer. He's a stakeholder. That's the difference you've made." Traoré nodded, moved by her words, but fully aware that the journey was far from over. Diamant Noir had been exposed, but not eliminated. The global diamond trade still operated in ways that favored Western profit over African prosperity. Resource exploitation remained widespread across the continent. And yet, something fundamental had shifted. The exposure of deep, systemic corruption within a supposedly legitimate industry had forced the world to look again. African leaders across the continent began renegotiating mining deals, demanding transparency, fair compensation, and local benefit. Communities were organizing, standing up for their right to share in the wealth beneath their feet. "We've taken a first step," Traoré told Mariam. "Not just for diamonds, but for all of Africa's resources. The principle is clear now. What comes from our land must serve our people." As they walked together toward the entrance of the newly renamed People's Diamond Cooperative, they passed a simple stone memorial. It bore the names of the 43 murdered miners. Below each name, a single phrase had been carved. Their sacrifice revealed truth. Their memory demands justice. Traoré paused, taking it in. The journey from that first horrific discovery to this moment had been long, dangerous, and costly. He had risked everything, his life, his presidency, and his country's stability. But in confronting the darkness of Diamant Noir, something brighter had emerged, a path forward, a model not just for reforming one mine, but for reimagining how Africa related to its own natural wealth. "They thought they were hiding bodies," Traoré said quietly, but what they were really doing was planting the seeds of a revolution. The Black Diamond conspiracy had been dragged into the light, and in that light, a new movement had begun to grow, a vision of resource justice, a belief that Africa's treasures didn't belong in private vaults or foreign banks, but in the hands of the people who had lived with the cost of extraction for generations. and who finally, at long last, were claiming their share.